Can y'all see my screen? This is weird. Okay, I think it's working. Cool. Hi, welcome everyone. So I forgot to copy and paste in our usual thing, but yes, please add your name to the attendees list if you are here. And I want to welcome anyone that's new or hasn't been here before. Does anyone want to introduce themselves? Okay, cool. Well, welcome back everyone then. We have a couple small things on the agenda. Jacques, do you want to start with a talk on a shared help desk person?
Yes. Sorry, just adjusting my microphone. We have discussed this in the past, the idea of having a shared help desk a couple of times. I learned to my surprise that support personnel are not free and that we need to pay them. They demand currency in exchange for services. So the proposal here is to ask our friends higher up in the chain of the OpenSSF whether they can fund such a position. The proposal there basically lays out some basic arguments for why. I have an incredibly scientific guess at numbers, which purely coincidentally are chosen because they're easy to calculate by hand. Anybody who wants to correct them, please do. One thing that's sort of an open question is what the exact process is going to be. This is still somewhat being debated, whether TAC is on the hot path to money or whether they, hear about it from the governing board or what goes on. So I'm going to say we'll probably go through TAC as a courtesy, but I believe ultimately a subcommittee of the governing board is the one that will be making the decision to fund if they find this proposal satisfactory. I would definitely love feedback. It feels short to me. I didn't come up with anything that was obviously missing to me, but it's like 2 pages, which I suppose I should be celebrating. But it makes me nervous that I've missed something. Miles.
Yeah, just I guess like 2 things right off the top of my head. And I'd love to hear how we solve it. So I'm assuming, we're talking about help desk for the registries that are run by like volunteers and foundations, obviously, as opposed to, something like NPM that has a corporate steward. For our, so we have a support squad for NPM. It's a number of, full-time support folks, but we have different support staff for different kinds of tickets that come in. And I think being laser focused on what this desk would take in, because even with the staff that we have massive capacity issues. And I could get some numbers on projections here, but you get basic support tickets. We get tickets that we just kind of have to throw out because they're like programming help questions and we send people to Stack Overflow. But then we get into the tickets that I think are getting closer to what you're talking about, primarily around account recovery being one of the biggest ones, malware reports, and vulnerable packages is another one. And then another big one that we get a lot of NPM, which is very unsustainable, is package naming disputes. Someone saying, hey, package A is not maintained or it's dormant, please give me the name. We have 3 agents that are just on malware and disputes and cannot keep up on the naming disputes simply because we have so much malware that needs to be dealt with. Separately with the number of agents that we have for the account recovery, it's very hard to keep up, and you need to make sure that people are relatively well trained, which I believe you point out in your doc.
Yes.
But our security of accounts that are protected with MFA are only as strong as the account recovery, because if you can go and do account recovery with a password reset, then you may as well not have 2FA. And this, I'm just repeating things
Yeah.
But these agents are ones that are going to be really susceptible to social engineering. And so part of the thing that would concern me here, and to be clear, it's concern in that I would want to see the proposal speak to it directly, not that I don't think it's doable. For us at NPM, we have to give those support staff chat ops is how we handle it. But they have kind of semi-admin operation, like they need to be able to do the things that they're saying to do. Like if we're doing an account recovery, what does that look like? So that may be resetting 2FA. And this is the kind of thing where I could speak for hours about all the edge cases, but let's say we have an account that has 2FA enforced. Can you remove the 2FA? If you do remove the 2FA, then what does that do for them? What commands and ways in which people can do it? So I think one of the things that I would like to see, or two of the things I'd like to see is like one, and I know that Python has some public data and I can get some data around this, is like, how many tickets are you expecting to come in? How much velocity do you think people could take? How are we actually going to allow these agents to operate and handle the tickets and act on them at the time that they need to do the reset? And do the registries have the engineering capacity to build out the infrastructure that's necessary to do it? One thing we're investing in right now at NPM, and I won't get too much into the specifics until later if you want me to, but we're trying to automate a whole bunch of the identity verification steps. So we launched OAuth application links between NPM and GitHub and NPM and Twitter, so people can link those accounts. And we're actually creating a like automated flow. So you go through and like when you're going to do recovery, you go through those OAuth flows ago, and we can match them and verify. We're doing verification of email via OTP so that by the time the ticket actually gets in front of the agent, the majority of the identity verification has actually been automated. And we're hoping that that will significantly lower the amount of work. But I do want to point out that like without that kind of investment, the identity verification portion of this is going to be unique for every single provider that we're talking about. And it's extremely bespoke and it's error prone and it's time intensive. So I would like to see maybe as part of this, and I'd be happy to contribute, there's like a proposal about like, hey, how are all of these other registries like going to tackle this problem? And is it going to be in a consistent way? Because yeah, it's a hard problem to solve. And if we only have one agent, for example, and now they have to worry about 4 different ways of doing everything and verifying identity across 4 different platforms using different vectors and factors, that's, in my opinion, a recipe for social engineering because it's really hard to keep track of all of that.
I don't disagree with any of the specifics. Definitely I'm thirsty for data if you can share it. I don't know how much you can. The number one, the reason I chose one person is simply that it's the smallest budgetable unit that can get the ball rolling. Not because I have a particular set of data or a simulation or anything like that that can show me what the final number will be. I should probably make it more emphatic in the proposal that this is not the final time we'll come and put our head out for money, that we'll want to grow that staff over time. Your point about the heterogeneity is well taken. In the original way I was thinking was that each repository would get contracts to basically do the engineering because everybody's flat strap at all times. That's the nature of both work and volunteering. But it sounds as though maybe what you're suggesting is having a consistent tool that instead turns to some APIs that are published with probably heterogeneity around the actual API endpoints, but as much as possible, a uniform interface for the agent to use because one of the reasons for doing this is to centralize the investment and therefore centralize the protection, where you get economies of scale in the kind of effort you invest in protecting it, because we're already going to be facing social engineering attacks anyway.
Yeah, I would say it's not just the consistency in the tools that the people are using, the consistency in the identity factors that are offered by the registry for people.
To the degree that folks agree on that, yes. There may still be local reasons for having slightly different procedures. Dustin, I see you've had your hand up for a while, so let's go to Dustin.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, I really like this proposal on it. I'm excited to iterate on it with you. I think I agree with Miles that like my least favorite thing about this is the idea of giving this potential person or group of people like kind of direct access. I think that, at least for the ecosystem that I'm focused on, that might be a non-starter just because the amount, not the amount of work that would need to go into providing that, but also like the amount of access that that would actually provide. Like the support person would have a lot of control over some pretty destructive actions. That said,
Well,
I think that the, well, go ahead.
sorry. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you very quickly. Yes, I agree. That's why the proposal says we should actually provide very limited interfaces just for the tasks that they carry out. I'm to be clear, I'm not proposing any kind of production access that a maintainer would have to carry out their duties today, but rather a limited one in scope. And also as part of the proposal, letting out contracts to develop that technology so that, you know, we're not putting an additional burden onto maintainers if they want to get this advantage.
Yeah, sure. I'm aware it's not production access, but even like the ability to remove malware is essentially deleting projects off the index, and the ability to reset account recovery is just like do whatever you want to an account to unlock it essentially. So
yeah.
But that said, I really like one kind of thing about this, which is that like I think what would actually be really powerful here is being able to have a direct line in between the support organizations of all these different places. And like I think like one thing when we respond to malware on PyPI, for example, a lot of times like that stuff is also hosted on GitHub, and it's just unfeasible for us to also file a support ticket against GitHub support and have them also take down the repository where it came from or that kind of thing. Being able to have like a tighter communication loop there of like, hey, we just took this down, you might want to look at it as well. For things like account recovery, having like a very fast loop in order to verify identity or GitHub access for a connected account, that stuff would be really valuable. So I think like this would, it might be a little bit more of a larger proposal, but seeing this paired with like providing funding for these organizations to hire support staff and then have a centralized OpenSSF person that sort of acts as a direct line or a mediator or works with all these together, I think that would be interesting to me as well, because I think a nonprofit organization is going to look at this and be like, well, why don't you just give us money and we'll hire support staff ourselves? Because we really want that as well, you know. So I think
Yeah, I'd be happy with that too. Part of the difficulty is that the scales vary according to ecosystem, because we have different numbers of packages, different number of users, but also different number of people in particular who are now under an MFA requirement. You know, I know, you know, PyPI is looking at thousands, NPM has hundreds. I think for Ruby gems at the moment, it's several dozen under the current policy, but we'd like to grow that. But we'd also, you know, face the same choke point as everybody, which is the more people you have under MFA, the more requests you get. That's where data, like actual hard data saying, you know, what is the relationship between the number of people under MFA and the rate of resets would be very helpful in planning a truer number. That's all I got to say about that.
I can contribute to those metrics. I'd be happy to.
I guess one thing that could be really helpful with that proposal would be a very, very clear scope of exactly what kind of actions these folks would be doing. One thing in particular, when it comes to like account recovery at NPM is, you know, it's more than just one story, but that requires someone to have an account. Like the most obvious one that I think is maybe worth focusing on in the light of MFA is I've lost my second factor, right? In the case of no second factor, you know, and you lose your password, you can go through a password reset, but then there's also like I've lost access to my email address. There's a lot of like subtlety, and I think there was another agenda item maybe to get into a bit of like the specifics of account recovery, and I can talk about that later. But I think if we got laser focused on exactly what these folks would be responsible for, and I think like the other thing that could be really interesting is maybe just not like to take a totally different approach to it, but if we are super focused just on MFA based recovery in light of trying to enroll folks, because that will see an increase of recovery, maybe a focus on identity verification, a platform that can be used to automate identity verification, to give registries like something that they can integrate with like that may actually be a really great tool, which may not even require like permanent staff beyond maintaining a service. Because I would say like from our end, when building things out, like, you know, the scripts and the agents are definitely like an important bit. But the thing that we've spent months working on with like tens of engineers is building up the infrastructure for identity verification. And even to like see your like this plan that you have right now be successful would kind of require every single one of the registries to do a similar engineering effort.
Yes.
So it's almost like a requirement before we could even think about agents. So there may be something there as far as like, you know, a generic service that could be offered around recovery. And I think consistency there would be really great.
Yeah, I'll have to think about that some more. Anyone else have a question or some comments? Of course, I encourage all of you to add comments as well to the document so that it's there for future references. All right, all yours, Dustin.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that, Jacques. Anything you want to get down as an action item on that? Like, do you want specific folks to review or?
Definitely the big one I would like to get is data, and also Miles, if you can somewhere basically make the either you can think of it as counter proposal or pre-proposal that there needs to be some sort of generic solution to identity linking or identity verification so that we have that, and I can try to rework the proposal with that in mind. And I'll come back in a couple of weeks and we'll look at it again.
So I'll give you an action item to collect the data, but you can give us all individual action items to give you specific data. Cool. Are we good there? Anything else? Should we move on to the next item? So Joseph, do you want to talk a little bit about MFA recoveries for Ruby gems?
Hello, everyone. It's actually unplanned follow-up of the previous topic in the agenda. So as mentioned by Miles, we are also facing, for now, we are handling this manually. So facing MFI recovery requests on support side. With the scale of the Ruby gems team, even as I mentioned, we have like 5 per week for now. With almost optional MFA, it's required only for pretty top authors for now. So we are afraid of increase of this number, and even with the current size of the support team, which is totally voluntary based, it's hard for us to keep track on this with some reasonable time. But still, we are providing this kind of manual service. So I was about to ask around what are the best practices. I think Miles already shared some at least concept done on their side. So I can kick off with our classic procedure, and it's actually related since with the package you also publish some metadata which includes source URL, which is mostly GitHub link to the public repo. So we look up for the author and ask the author for random repo which is pushed to the GitHub to open some issue mentioning I would like to recover my OTP code, but it's still public, right? So it's probably not the best way. And that way we can just check if that user is actually the one who has access to the source repository. And then we proceed with just disabling MFA so they can go with email reset. And when they are actually having required MFA, which I think not happened ever for now, all the classic actions are disabled for them before they re-enable MFA. So this is our really basic way of doing some verification. All it's done manually, so there's no automation. So my question is, if there's any better way to do this, and Miles started this explaining there are some way to automate, but also there are some cons on this, right? Since then you can get things out of control. And for now, we have no UI to actually reset the MFA. So we are just reaching the application by the console and resetting by some script in there. Our plan for now to add this basic functionality just to click reset MFA to the web UI for the admins. But there's even for now, there's no concept of any like power user or admin on Ruby gems. So this will need some time to like revisit all the idea and how to implement properly. So this is how we do it for now.
Yeah, Miles.
Yeah, I'll try to not talk for the rest of this meeting, because I could talk for hours about this. This is all I've thought about like the last couple months. So I will just start by saying that where we started at with NPM was not too different from where you're at, Joseph. We had text fields on the profile of the NPM account where you could put in a Twitter account or a GitHub account. And our support team would utilize that information to basically do like, verification. We'd ask them to tweet something or we'd ask them to make a secret gist. We'd verify that identity. As part of like the overall improvements for account security, that was identified as a security risk by our security teams. And from a philosophical standpoint, what was generally thought about was different factors of identity that you use for authentication. We're using a point system are worth so many points. And if you want to do something, for example, like recover MFA, like I have 2FA on my account and I want to do it, that you need to collect enough points of identity from other factors that are an equivalent in order to recover. Otherwise, you're actually lowering the security of the overall thing. So like, for example, in this case, for us, we consider email to be 6 points of identity, and we consider 2FA to be 10. So if you have an account and you've lost your email address, we want to find about 6 points of identity from other sources in order to give you back access to your account and change the email address. In the case of GitHub account, that's only actually 3 points of identity in our current workflow. And it's also worth mentioning that knowledge of your password is something that's even required. Like we're working on making a requirement to even get into the recovery flow altogether. So you need to log into your account with your email address and password. That brings you to the screen where if you don't have 2FA, you have to put in your OTP from login verification, or if you are using OTP or 2FA, you're prompted for 2FA. And we have a button at the bottom to recover your account. The form that you can go through to recover your account, you can actually only get to from there. So our agents already know by the time a ticket has been opened that the person opening the ticket has knowledge of password. And this protects against kind of like drive-by social engineering where someone doesn't even know the password, but we need to verify the identity to protect against password stuffing. And so we verify the email, that's 6 points. We verify, the Twitter, that's 3 points. We can look for, I think we use 9 points right now to recover for 2FA. I'd have to go and check the chart. Access tokens, confirming an access token, which we immediately invalidate after confirming that it's accurate, is worth 8 points. And so we have this kind of whole chart of all the different kinds of identity that we can verify and utilize that. So with what you've described right now in our methodology, your security for removing MFA would actually be a little bit lower than the actual protection that MFA itself offers. But with that said, we need to be pragmatic, because if people can't recover their accounts at all, that doesn't help either. So that's why we've been investing in other ways in which people can do identity verification. I'd have to talk to folks internally about sharing some more of these details more explicitly, but we do have a full script with various scenarios of why people could need to recover accounts, each of the different kinds of identity factors, and then a chart for referencing which factors add up to enough identity to recover in particular scenarios. And I'll see if I can maybe get some of that documentation, even if it's just with a smaller group, to share with folks, because we've been iterating on those for months. So there's a lot of effort that we can maybe save y'all. And I see Jason's comment here.
Miles, are you talking?
Yeah. Just one last thing I was going to say really quickly. We were inspired by the DMV point system. for the identity verification. So it is kind of similar there.
That's gonna be first.
Jason, you're pretty choppy. I don't think we caught that. I'm gonna go ahead and call myself real quick. So one thing I would say is like the PyPI processes sounds very similar to Ruby gems, including the fact that we have to go into the database because we don't have kind of production controls or interface for doing these kind of things. One question I had was for Ruby gems, what is the actual mechanism that users request the reset? Is this like, is there a support ticket system? Is it a GitHub issue? Is it something built into rubygems.org?
On Ruby gems, we have a support email which is maintained by Zendesk. So they just send an email, it's basic free from, so they just write down their problem and they just request MFA reset, which is then stored in Zendesk, and we need to log into Zendesk and answer and continue from that point in there.
Okay, so the other thing I wanted to ask is for all folks here, is there any point at which during MFA being reset for a user that this is made public, like either in the timeline for the project that that user owns or to co-maintainers of the projects that that user owns, or either public broadly to the entire ecosystem or public to other folks that might be interested to know that that user has had a reset? No. Is that something that's worthwhile? Like, is it potentially dangerous to tell the entire ecosystem, like on this day, we had to reset the users to FA and, keep it, not like keep an eye on them, but like, maybe you should be aware.
I would say yes, jumping in ahead of any queue that might have formed. I would say yes, that MFA reset is something that's worthy of publishing an attestation about in the transparency log. It's a very security sensitive event. The only sort of asterisk that comes with that is that generally we've all shied away from publishing MFA status on the theory that it provides a useful phone book of people to go and attack because they don't have MFA. So by process of elimination, if somebody does a reset, you know that they had MFA enabled at some point. So maybe it's not that bad because it doesn't really tell you who doesn't have MFA, it only tells you who does.
There are various kinds of resets. So just knowing that someone did a reset, whether it's a password reset or an MFA reset, may be sufficient. Just to be clear, I'm not advocating for this, but doesn't need to be explicitly MFA.
But to also continue, Jacques, on your idea, the problem with hiding MFA setup or when it's enabled or disabled will be eliminated when it will be required for everyone, right? Then this info maybe can be done in public since everyone is will have MFA enabled.
That will be a happy day.
That's assuming that that's possible. Yeah, I mean, I think for like ecosystems with mandates, then we already know who those maintainers are, and maybe it's not detrimental to publish the MFA status or change in status due to a reset because we knew they had it enabled already. Summarize that. I think that was kind of what you said. Yeah, okay. Any other thoughts here? So I guess like I've sort of seen similar requests for publishing change of status for things like if the source repository changes for a given project, things like that, but I haven't seen that quite extended into the like things like a contributor was added or removed or like something changed with one of these contributors. But I don't know, I think it's kind of interesting to think about, and I think probably in the future those would be interesting signals for people that want to sort of have a deeper understanding of the security of their dependencies.
On the NPM SIG-Store proposal, in one of the, I don't know, there was a few comments on it. In one of the several dozen comments, there's a dog. I published a list of events that I thought would be of interest to a future sort of log of things that go into, say, recall, so that people can track that kind of thing. So yeah, change of, MFA reset, but also things like added owner, removed owner, transferred ownership from one person to another, that sort of thing is all sort of sensitive information that has a strong signal that you should take a closer look for other information.
This becomes an interesting challenge, though, about like the balance between security and transparency, because on NPM, for example, you could add any number of maintainers to a package who have published permissions. But as far as like our public ledger is concerned, only the maintainers who have actually published a package show up in the authors list. So, I don't really know what the solution to that would be, but like in theory, if we had every additional maintainer who's added to a package now in a public ledger, all of those accounts now become targets for account takeover if someone wanted to take over the package. Now, like security through obscurity is not necessarily great, and we obviously want to know if there's like 100 people who can all push the button to publish a package. But I don't know what the right solution is there, but it's like I get uncomfortable no matter what we do.
You might be working in security if. Yeah.
Okay, well, Joseph, thanks for sharing that. And I guess, yeah, any action items or takeaways from that we should focus on? Like, I think there might be a kind of a proposal, at least something to think about here in terms of like what can be shared, what level of transparency is worthwhile for sharing things like this. Yeah, it seems like also funding for some of these organizations to like build better controls in and don't have to go into the database and make these changes would be really great.
Yeah, thanks for all the info from all sides. I was just about to ensure as well that we are not doing anything totally wrong. So it seems we all share some basics in this, at least for now. So that makes me less nervous when doing this. Thanks.
Okay, anything else? One last quick thing. So Brandon's not here, but he asked me to share that we've published a package manager survey. So you might remember the long spreadsheet that some folks filled out in the past. That was sort of about like the current status of a lot of the package managers and indices. The survey is sort of a more forward-looking questionnaire. And so you can, roll through this and answer this for your ecosystem. We have had a couple of folks respond to this already, but it'd be great to get this just for some of the other big ones. I think Brandon's hoping to get some comprehensive responses here in the next couple of weeks. So if we don't hear from folks, we'll probably start asking more specifically, but feel free to fill it out, and also like, don't worry about filling it out twice, because I think getting like a sense of where multiple people think it's at, that'd be really helpful as well. So any questions about that? It should take about 15 minutes. It is a little bit long, but yeah, worthwhile. Any other agenda items? Okay, I'm going to call it quits. Thanks everyone for your time, and see you next time.